Hello everyone, welcome to Curated Reality. Adan, say hi.
Hey, hi everybody.
In last episode we discussed CI and build system with Nate, right? In this episode we have Roger with us to discuss about Gradle build system optimization and developer productivity. Hey Roger, welcome to the stream.
Hi, Vedanta. Hi, Adnan. Glad to be here.
Adnan, do you want to go ahead and set the context maybe of what we're after today?
Sure. So first off, thank you, Roger, for taking time and making time for us to come here. And just so that for the sake of our audiences out there, Roger is Nate's colleague, and that's how this managed to happen. And as in the last video, we have been speaking with Nate, right, and where he mentioned how they have been working towards optimizing the build speed and things like that. And Roger has been the other person that he's been working with in the same company, and that's they have been focused on doing most of that work. Today we wanted to focus a bit about what all tools can we use, how do you measure, what do you do, and things like that, and in general understand what's your experience been going through all of these things, right? Because as developer productivity is a very second thought afterthought for most of the companies, and how do you convince people to prioritize it versus something like a feature or other work as well, right? And I think we would like to have that discussion around that, wherein how would you start, where would you start looking at, and things like that, as well as to do you even need something like a automation, and if you need it, like how does it help you in your day-to-day processes, and what kind of effects does it have, right?
Cool.
Cool. So, with that context, I guess we could begin by if you could just give us a brief idea as to what your work has been majorly around in the last 8 to 10 months, and why did you choose to be in like a developer productivity and automation kind of a this, right? Because as an Android developer, you're not really these are things that are not really, I would not say they are not part of your job, but then they are something which is like a longer term thing, right? Like a bigger firm tries to invest in it once they have reached a point where the builds are so slow that they can't just progress further without a build, at least for like 30, 40 minutes worth of builds. So
Yeah.
how did you and Nate come about trying to start this process, and what was your motivation to begin with?
Okay, cool. Thanks for that question, Adnan. So, for the last 8 to 10 months, my work has been a balance between feature development and a lot of automation and working in the developer productivity space. What made me sort of fall in love with the developer productivity space is just that idea of trying to make the engineers on the team as productive as possible. Just for some context, our builds would take anything between 40 to 45 minutes in the past. And that was such a long time in terms of a feedback cycle, right? So you'd find that people would rarely run their builds locally on their machines, and people would wait till the end after they finished working on a feature. They push it to Travis, and then it runs for another 30 or 40 minutes, then it fails. So you find that engineers are not as productive. And I remember when I joined the team, I tried our project I couldn't run tests locally because the whole test suite was broken. And I remember once I fixed that, I got curious. Can we push this time further down? And I just started experimenting in that space. Then Nate joined the company, and we had similar interest in that space. And along the way, we also got to do sort of a trial with Gradle Enterprise and their tooling, and that has been a really amazing experience because not only do you get access to Gradle Enterprise, the tool, but you also get access to a Gradle engineer who understands how the system works, and they've had experience supporting different projects, and they just give us pointers, and that way we were able to push down our build times from 45 minutes to about 8 minutes
Cool.
thereabout.
That's great.
Then Yeah, and as you know, this is a continuous process. You don't just do it once. And then we introduced a certain module, then we pushed it up again to 15 minutes. So it's something you keep working on. So as the project grows, build times generally also grow. So it's something you need to keep on working on often. So yeah, that's it in a nutshell. And I'm sure as we go along, we'll keep sharing, and I'll try to get into the details as much as I can. Yeah.
Sure. So, yeah, you briefly mentioned about Gradle Enterprise, right? Like,
Yeah.
I think it is worth pointing out that a lot of people don't think of Gradle just as a build tool, but the reality is Gradle is a full-fledged company and enterprise solution, right? Which they offer
Yeah.
as well. And I think like I have never had an chance to experiment with that. What did that look like, and like what kind of benefits did you see you were in the Gradle Enterprise when you were working with them, and like does how much did that manage to help you? Obviously you mentioned the time itself being reduced from 45 minutes to 8 to 9 minutes. That itself is a huge great improvement right there. But then apart from that, what was the experience like, and like did you was it more about them telling you what to do, or collaborative? How did that process work for you?
Okay, cool. That's a good question. So the biggest win was definitely the reduced build times, but we
Right.
got to learn a lot about just the Gradle build tool, and also how to optimize your builds, right? So for instance, some of the things we learned was how our project was architected wasn't right. As you can imagine, this is a project that's, I think, about 5 to 6 years old. We've inherited code that's pretty old. They didn't follow, back in the day, they weren't following some of the architecture ideas that we do currently, like modularization and all that.
Right.
So you can imagine that would definitely hurt your build times, in that your code is not properly modularized, and when you make one change in a module that's not related to another, it keeps running the tests across the board. So those are some of the pointers we got from them. And then also just learning how to navigate around the tool, learning how to run experiments, right? Because at the end of the day, developer productivity engineering sort of falls into these 3 main categories, where you identify bottlenecks, you measure, and then you prioritize to fix, right? So just going through that process a couple of times for different parts of your project, experimenting, and then also learning how to identify cache misses, right? Like part of the Gradle build tool and the optimization build tool, you have build scans and the build cache. So sometimes when you're caching artifacts, sometimes they're cache misses. And whenever cache misses occur, it tends to increase your build time. So narrowing down to identifying these cache misses, how to fix them, and the different tools. I think that was very valuable to us, even as we went through this process. Yeah.
Okay.
Cool.
So when you create a project with Industry Studio, right, you get some default configurations for building. So is there anything you can maybe tweak and optimize your build time? Do you have any experience around that?
Oh yeah. So when let's say, for instance, you create a new project, right? And as you imagine, as you continue building the project, the lines of code grow, and as a result, compile time increases and stuff like that. You'll need to learn how to optimize your project, because every project is different, has different needs and stuff like that. So off the top of my head, in terms of configuration, you'd need to check around the, let me try and see if I can just pull this up real quick. I think one of the major issues would be around the garbage collection. So you might find sometimes that you have set your JVM memory heap size might be low, and you might find that as you're building your project, it runs out of memory and fails the build, right? So that's one of the things that you would need to look out for as your project starts to grow. And also, using some of the caching technologies. So for instance, there's the build cache that I talked about. So the build cache is separated into two. There's your local cache and a remote cache. And if you can get that set up, that would be pretty cool. And then also leveraging the build scans, right? The build scans give you information about your build in terms of the infrastructure, how have you set it up, and now things like the heap size is what you can catch in there, and then just generally how your build performs, like the initialization and configuration phase, is that running well? When the artifacts are being generated, and you can see where most of the time is going into your build, and then try and fix around that. If you want, I could show you. There's a project I just started. I'm doing it in conjunction with a blog post that I'm writing, and I was just doing a few setups. Probably I could just show guys how to quickly set up the build scan and build cache, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, we would love
All right,
it.
cool. All right, let me just share my screen real quick, and this shouldn't take that long. Share screen. All right, let me know if you can see my IDE.
Yes, we can see your IDE.
Yes.
All right, cool. So for starters, I'll just open the build.gradle, should be this one. No, it's not the one. It should be the project. So the settings.gradle. Here we go. Cool. All right. So is the font size okay?
Yes, I think it's.
Should I zoom? It's okay. All right, cool. So for starters, if you want to set up build scans or build cache, you need to plug in the Gradle Enterprise closure. So once you plug that in, you set up the configuration like this. So the key thing to focus on here is the build scan. And then for you to be able to connect to the scans.gradle.com, that's sort of the URL that displays your build scans. You need to sort of accept the terms of service, make sure that it's yes. If you don't specify it here, whenever you run it in your terminal, you need to keep typing in yes so that it can generate. So to simplify, you just accept it here. And then you can say that you always publish always, meaning that you always want the build scan to be available. So I can just run this real quick so that you can see. Let me see, what command can I run?
Yes, certainly.
Let me just run like a test command real quick so that it can generate build scan. This shouldn't take too long. Here we go. So once it's successful, or even if it fails, it generates the build scan. So you can see this is the URL right here. I'll just copy that. Come to my browser. Oh, man, I have so many tabs open. All right, let me see. Give me a second. This is the one I wanted. Okay, cool. So here we are. So I'll just open the build scan right here. And as you can see,
I think you have shared the application, not the screen. We can still see your Android Studio.
Oh, okay, cool. Let me switch the window. Okay. This should be it now. Let me know. Can you see the browser now?
Yeah.
All right, cool. So that's the build scan I clicked on from the terminal. We opened it here, and as you can see, there's a bunch of things that you can look at in here. For instance, there's this is your build, sort of like the summary of your build, and as you can look in here, you can see like the different configurations. For instance, I have my build cache turned on. The daemon is on. Most of the stuff here is off. So most of this stuff here, you actually turn it on when you need it. And then you can see like the infrastructure here. Mostly this is like the developer's machine, or if it's on CI, it'll be the CI machine that your build is running on. So yeah, and there are just different tabs in here. You can check out the performance. So this is what I was saying about your build, right? So the total build time was 6 seconds, and then you can see where majority of the time went into, like configuration, startup, and then the execution. And let's say, for instance, if you want to see whether your build cache is enabled, you can come in here and it can show you whether it's enabled right there. And I've also enabled a remote cache here. So I'll just switch back to the IDE and show you how that is done for the remote build cache. So for the build cache, you'll come and set it up in your settings.gradle. Here's the build cache closure. So as I mentioned earlier, there's a local build cache and a remote build cache. So for the local build cache, you'll just add the closure here. You enable this to true, and then you can specify the directory where you want your artifacts to go. By default, it will go to your Gradle, to the Gradle directory for your system. But in this case, I just wanted to show people that you can actually sort of redirect where you want this to go. And I put it in the root directory of our project. And if I open here, you can see these are the artifacts present in our local cache. Yeah, so it's right here in your project. And then you can say remove this. You can remove any unused entries after 30 days. And then now this is now the one that I love, the remote build cache, right? So basically you specify the URL of where you want your cache to be. Most of the time, okay, most of the ones I've set up, I haven't set it up with an SSL certificate. So you'll need to allow untrusted, you enable it. And then here you add like a Boolean flag. So I'm still writing this blog post. So as you can see here, there's a Boolean here. So it checks whether this is a server, and it just does a system get env and check whether it's CI. So ideally, this should be this way. So if it notices that this is your like the CI server, right, is when it pushes artifacts to that CI server. So ideally, a developer's machine is not supposed to be able to push artifacts there. The only system is supposed to be the CI. Then now the developers pull down those cache artifacts into their local build cache, which I'd highlighted here. Cool. I feel like I've rambled for a bit. Let me put a pause there, but I hope you've been able to see like the different technologies, just setting up a build scan, a build cache, and how to use them to get more information out of your build. Yep.
Yeah, cool. So one of the other questions that I personally had, right, as you mentioned that you inherited a old project which was not really set up and optimized for things like modularity and architectures and things like those, right? And most of the times, as a monolith project keeps growing, the challenge that occurs is the build time keeps increasing with every new piece of code that you keep adding, right? How did that transition feel like to move away? Did you migrate everything to modular individual modules, or was it like all in one go, or was it like step by step? And how did you like manage to convince the rest of the team to get on board, right? Because it is a painful period to go through that transition until that completes as well.
Yeah, that's true. So just to clarify, we haven't completed like modularizing the app. It's something that's ongoing, because as you can imagine, as a project that's been ongoing for like 5 to 6 years, there's been different people who've joined the team, different people who implement things differently. And the approach we've been using right now is for every new feature we build, we sort of now implement the modularization or the architecture approach that we want to go for. And then we've been trying to prioritize and break down like the different parts of the code base and modularize those, because the code is actually pretty brittle. And if you try and modularize everything at a go, it might not work. So what we're trying to do is for the main features, we try and modularize those, put them into different modules, and just make sure that your code is not tightly coupled. So that has been our approach. For the new features that we introduce, we follow the architecture approach that we desire, and then we try and prioritize the different parts of the code base, especially those that are not high impact, because there's the part of the code that's your core business logic. You wouldn't want to jump in there and break that. But if there are supporting pieces that you can modularize, even as you work towards getting to this, that would be great. So that has been our approach, and it's still ongoing. We haven't completely sort of fixed the mess that we inherited. Yeah.
Okay, so there's a question on our chat from Chetan Garg. Is writing Gradle script in Kotlin has any advantages except of autocomplete? Also, what's the impact on build time?
That's a good one. So majority of our build is still in Groovy. We haven't moved it to Kotlin. And as you rightly put it, to me, I feel like the major advantage is the autocomplete as well, because as we're interacting with the engineer from Gradle, that's one of the things that they mentioned, that the advantage was that autocomplete feature that the Gradle KTS sort of introduces. I'm not too sure about any other advantages, but I can look into it, and yeah, definitely, since this stream will be up, I can just share it in the comments in future.
Yeah, and just to answer the second part of the thing, right? I don't think there is a direct impact on the build time. The language has nothing to do with it, right? At the end of the day, it's just more of a convenience thing, right? Because I think a lot of people ignore Gradle because of the whole Groovy itself. That hey, you know what? I do not understand what is going on here. Like, let's not just mess with it. Whatever Android Studio provides, let's stick to it and just move on and figure out later. So I think that was from Google's end, that was an effort to be more open about it. And hey, you know what? You can, if it is in Kotlin, then maybe more Android developers will go in there and like spend more time there.
Yeah.
Okay, there's another question regarding custom Gradle scripts. So, do you have any custom scripts on your project? And if yes, what are those scripts? And
yeah, so we have some custom Gradle scripts in our project. Off the top of my head, there's one I created the other day. So the beauty of the Gradle build cache is there's this concept called cache node replication. So our team is distributed across the globe. So we have some guys for QA in India, some engineers in Africa, some in the United States. So for you to replicate your cache node, you can create a node for Africa, a node for India, and a node for states, so that whenever an engineer is pulling cache artifacts, for instance, me here in Kenya, I don't have to ping the server that's in the United States to get my cache artifacts. I can ping one closer to my time zone, so that the cache is so that the caching is actually faster, right? So we had to create a custom Gradle script for that, and the way we did it is basically what the script does is when you run it, it generates a local file based on your time zone. So if you select like the East Africa time zone, it loads up the URL for the cache that is in your zone, probably West Africa, United States, or the offshore team. So that's one of the custom scripts that we were able to create. And it works really well for us. We just documented that, and the engineers know how to trigger that script to point to the cache node that's closest to them. Yes, I think that's one of the interesting ones we have. The rest, the other one we have is for the environments, right? So we have a dev environment, QA. We got rid of staging, so it's dev, QA, and production. And each of those environments, or rather, each of those flavors of those apps points to a different endpoint. So whenever you switch from dev to QA to prod, we sort of came up with a custom script to load up the correct endpoint. Finally, there's another interesting one for our APKs. So we use JFrog Artifactory to store especially our production APKs. But right now we also want to move to QA because we realized something interesting with there's the Firebase app distribution. So Firebase app distribution only keeps your APKs for about 150 days. After that, you lose anything older than that. So we realized that the other day, and we're moving to migrate our APKs to that. So the way it works is whenever we cut a release, part of that custom script actually uploads the production APK to JFrog Artifactory for future reference. So yeah, I think off the top of my head, those are some of the custom scripts that we have in our project. Yeah.
Right. I actually kind of like the whole time zone based thing that you have done, right? It's like what a CDN is for content for websites. It is something similar wherein you have a CDN for your builds caches as well, right? And I think it's actually very interesting to me given the timing of it, right? Given that so many people are remote and across the world, across time zones, right? That's the interesting bit, right? Because up until now, you could share builds, and if somebody has done, one of the team member has downloaded a particular artifact, then everybody else just gets the same one from the cache. But then across time zones, it becomes across different countries, it becomes challenging, right? Because having just one central one is a long round trip delay and the internet connectivity and things like that, right? So I kind of really like the idea of having it local and closer to you, as hey, you know what, so even if let's say you are like 4 people in Asia at this point of time, and if you have one which all the 4 can reference to, then that makes much more sense in terms of build times and caching as well.
Yeah, and the beauty of that is the closer the cache is to you, the idea is the faster the build time should be. And I'm actually looking to experiment. I have an old Windows machine, so there's a blog post I'm working on just to compare build times with that cache node replication. So having a machine right next to you, seeing how that the speeds on that, and then now the Africa node, and then probably West Africa and States, and then just seeing the time differences with the round trips that it has to do. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. That would be pretty interesting. Like, I think this is the first time that I've heard something like that, to be honest, like a global CDN kind of a thing across different countries, right? And it makes so much sense at this point, given so many of us are working across different time zones and countries.
Yeah.
Cool. The other thing I think which I wanted to speak about is trying to understand from the perspective of how do you prioritize. So I'm assuming you have some sort of a release cycle in the company there, right? So work-wise, and how does the build related things and developer productivity related things come into picture? Like, do you plan along with it, or is this a separate thing, and then both of them converge at some point and things like that? How does that work for most of the cases in your company?
Okay, cool. That's a good question. So for our company, we actually have a two-week release cycle. So we release very often, and at the end of the 2 weeks, we have there's a meeting we call engineering needs, right? So so we have the product team, we have the mobile team, and we just share the different needs that we have ahead of sprint planning the next week. So we sort of prioritize feature work, and as I mentioned, the developer productivity work, automation work is tech debt. So we have a framework that sort of prioritizes both. And as I mentioned, Nate and myself have sort of taken charge of this space. And if we feel that there's something that we need to implement now that would help the team as we move forward, we actually mention it during that particular call, and then it's documented, and then we have an epic for the Android build optimization work, where we now go in and create tickets, and then those are added to the sprint. So that's sort of the framework that we use, and it's as I mentioned, it's tech debt, and it's something that you have to take initiative for. So I can give you an example. I remember when I joined the company last year, our Gradle version was 4.10.3, and at the time, what was the latest was 5 dot something. So we had to make that jump, but we did it gradually from 4 to 5 to 6. And as you can
Right.
imagine, certain things broke along the way,
Right.
but we were able to fix that. And with the upgrade, we were actually able to tap into some of the newer features that we're shipping, right? Because the latest one right now, there's configuration caching and stuff like that. And yeah, it's been an interesting journey as we've gone along. So back to your earlier question, yeah, that's part of our process. We have bi-weekly release cycles, and we have this engineering needs meeting where if we have anything in that space that we need to work on, we share with the team, and we create tickets for the same. Yeah.
Okay, so apart from Gradle Enterprise, is there any other tool for productivity purpose organization?
That's a good question. So I know Gradle Enterprise is the core one, but there are certain plugins that we use to support that. For example, there's Gradle Doctor. It's by his name is Nelson. He's one of the Gradle engineers, and basically, once you add this particular plugin into your project, it sort of flags some of the issues with your build and gives you hints on some of the stuff that you can fix so that your build can run that much faster. I think one of the key ones was around the JDK that your project points to versus your system points to, and it tends to spin up different daemons. So you might find that when you run your project on the command line and when you build the project with Android Studio, the build times are sort of impacted because they're not pointing to the same JDK, so they're not using the same daemon. So immediately you run that plugin and it notices that difference, your build fails and it just screams at you. You see a bunch of red and it tells you that you should change this. Once you change that, the rest are other warnings that it just hints to you. I could actually, let me just share my screen so the viewers can actually see the plugin. Do let me know if you can see my IDE.
Yes.
We see your browser.
Oh, browser, sorry, browser. Do you see the Gradle Doctor plugin?
Yes.
Yeah, so this is the one. So it's just a simple plugin, and it comes with the documentation here, how to set it up, and then once you run it, it'll be able to show you any issues that you have in your project, and it's something that's constantly being worked on. As you can see, 13 days ago, it's a project that's constantly being worked on. The next one I could speak about
I have a question regarding this plugin. So is it compatible with normal Gradle, or you need Gradle Enterprise for?
Yes. You do. So Gradle Enterprise is just a web. It's a web platform,
okay.
And so Gradle Enterprise is just a web platform. So which is primarily powered by the Gradle build tool. So yeah, this is just like any plugin that you would add to your build.gradle app. Same thing. You just add it in there, run it, and then it'll just tell you of any issues that you have in your project. Yeah. Cool. So I could probably mention the next one. There's the Gradle Profiler. So this is one we've used as well. So basically, what the Gradle Profiler helps you do is to run. I think the major thing is benchmarking. So it's sometimes you might want to run a couple of builds back to back, and then just sort of get the benchmark and see how it's performing and stuff like that. As you can imagine, that can be a very manual process. And what this tool does is that it helps you run these different benchmarks automatically. So you just specify sort of the metrics that you want, and then you let it run. And it can run anything between 10, 15, 30 different benchmarks, and then it generates this chart for you, and you can see how your build is performing. So an example is you can have a master build, and a build for a branch that you're working on. So you can run the builds and compare the two and see sort of the impact the changes you've introduced in your branch are having on the project. So I think this is a really good one. Nate actually has had more experience with this than I have, and I know it's a bit more of a complicated process setting it up, but once you've done it a couple of times, it's much easier. So yeah, these are like the two main ones, but there's one that the Android Studio tool introduced. I'm just trying to find it. Is it? I think they call it the Gradle Profiler or something like that.
Right.
Let me see if I can. No, I don't have it here. But it was introduced in Android Studio, and it basically also just shows you the different parts of your build and the ones that need attention and the ones that you can optimize around. So those are the three main tools that we use, I think, day to day. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Cool. So one other question would be around, so when do you start to optimize, right? Like a lot of the things is, let's say I have a brand new project which we are starting off from scratch, right? Do you think of optimization from the day one itself? Do you of course, assuming if we are starting a new project, we would anyways have it in modules and follow those practices today. But then, specifically looking at build times and optimization, right?
Yeah.
When do you start looking at, and how do you start off with is the first part. The second aspect to it also is, can there be something like over optimizing when you don't need it and trying to like going the other direction that, hey, you know what, you actually messed up your build times by trying to mess around with it.
Okay, cool. Those are really good questions. Let me take the first one. So I see it in two ways. So I'll speak towards like a greenfield project starting from scratch.
Right.
And most of the cases you might find an already existing project. So you join a company or you're consulting for someone and they already have an application. So for like a greenfield project, what I'd say is you can just do the basics, right? Even if you've just started and maybe you don't have you haven't written this huge test suite, right? Because it's tests. Right. Whenever you run tests, it does take some time. You can just start with build scans, just having the build scan so that you can understand your project and understand your build times and where majority of the time is going in. And then as your project grows, you can introduce now the caching. But it's never too early to introduce caching, in my opinion. But you can just start with the build scan, and as the project grows, you introduce the caching, both local and remote, and now start using some of these other tools that I'd mentioned earlier. For an already existing project, I'll just give you an example of my case. When I joined, I realized the build times were really high. We hadn't even moved to the latest Gradle version. We're still using 4.10, which didn't have some of the features for optimization, right? Like for build performance optimization that had been introduced by the Gradle team. So I just started there. Are you using the latest tooling, whether it's the Gradle tool, whether it's the Android Gradle plugins? And you might find that if you're not using the latest tooling, that might be hurting your build performance. So that's where you can start looking. And I'm sure for majority of people, they're not necessarily on the latest tooling. I remember there's a time I was sharing, it was a few months ago, I was just sharing about how we've been able to move to Gradle 6.3. And at the time, someone was just saying how they're still on Gradle 4. And I felt so bad for them because I knew it was hard for them to even optimize because they were missing some of the important tooling that was in the latest tools, and also just the difficulty to convince your managers around why this is important, right? Because as I mentioned, this is tech debt, and you'd find that people always prioritize feature development over tech debt. But you might find that this will trip you up in the future if you don't prioritize for it. And that's why I like the way our team is structured. We actually prioritize both, and we try and push them concurrently. Yeah.
Also,
For the second one, oh yeah, sure.
also sometimes there are some difficulties, right? For example, in our
Yeah.
organization, we are on Gradle Android plugin 3.6 right now. So we
Oh, okay.
want to move to 4.1, but the problem is DexGuard. We use DexGuard, so DexGuard is not compatible with 4.1. So
Right.
there's a kind of blocker. Those kind of situation also comes up
Yeah.
even if you convince your managers to update.
Yes, that's true. That's true. So some of those blockers do occur, and until probably maybe the Gradle team or the Android team come up with a fix or
Right,
something, you find that you're actually blocked. Which reminds me of something. There's a certain tool we've been using. Let me just share my screen real quick. This is around the cache misses and some of the issues that occur for the build. So if you can see my screen, there's a plugin here by Gradle. It's called the Android Cache Fix Gradle plugin. So you might find there's one notorious cache fix. It's around Room, the Room database. So that one has been a bit of a problem for the different Android Gradle plugins. So this is just this particular plugin is just a fix for that, so that you don't lose your gains in build times for some of these issues. And it's something it's a tool that's constantly being worked on. And then once Android sort of fixes those issues with their Gradle plugin, that they normally mention it here, and probably they remove some of those cache fix issues. So they even mention the Gradle versions that are supported, the Gradle plugins, the Android version Gradle plugins, and also Kotlin versions. So yeah, this is for those who might be experiencing some issues with the cache misses. This is a good tool to have. And then yeah, they even show you some of the issues that they're tracking. For instance, yeah, whether it's merged resources. Yes, this is the Room one that I'd mentioned. This has been a constant problem, and it's being tracked on the Google issue tracker. So yeah, I just remembered and just thought that I'd mention this. But back to what Vedanta mentioned, yes, that is a reality. Sometimes you might want to move forward, but you might find some of the things that you've implemented in your project might actually be a blocker, and that's a reality. Yeah.
Right. Vedant, I have a solution for your problem. Stop using DexGuard.
Yeah. Right now, that's not an option for us.
Yeah. Cool.
Okay, there were a couple of questions in the live chat as well. Let's see if we can get through a few of them. One interesting one is, so it talks about how devs in the same team can also be on different versions of Android Studio, right? And that kind of messes up a lot of like plug and Gradle versions and things like that, right? How do you kind of tend to manage those things? Do you have a general setting, or is there a way wherein you could share configurations across a team or things like that?
That's a good question. So for Android, how do we do it on our team? I think whenever a new version of Android Studio comes out, you'd find someone on the team, maybe Nate, just says, "Hey, this is out there. Anyone on it?" And then we'd definitely see whether people would see like guys move towards the more the newer tooling, if I may put it that way. Whether it has an impact on the build, I'm just trying to think, because right now, let me see, what version of Android Studio am I on? Let me just check. I know most of the team is on it. I'm on 4.1.
It's the latest one.
Yeah, it should be the latest one. And I think most of the team is on it. I think the way our team is structured is we lean more towards the new tooling unless there's an issue.
Right.
So most of the times you'll find there's one brave soldier who will go and try it out and see whether it breaks. And then if it doesn't, they report back, and then the rest of us migrate to the new version. But just a tip for the guys on the call, I normally have 2 versions of Android Studio installed. So there's the stable one that I use for work, and then like a canary version where I test out the project and see whether anything breaks. So most of the time, I'll play around with the Canary one. If anything fails or breaks, like you can notify the team. But you have this stable one that's for your day to day, so that in case anything breaks, you're not blocked from doing your work. So that's sort of the approach and the tip that I'd have for the guys tuning in. Yeah.
Right. I think I love that about Google when they started doing the build separately, right? Like previously, it would just you would either have to pick a stable or a canary version, right? And they could
Yeah.
not coexist.
Right.
But today, with the whole this of you having two Android Studio versions being able to run parallelly on your machine, right? And I think that's great. As you mentioned, you could have a stable one which you always use for your actual work, but then have the canary one wherein you could try out new features, new plugins, and things like that, and see how your project compiles against that, right? And you
Yeah.
always get an idea that, hey, you know what, this breaks. Also, I think it is a great way to prepare for what can come your way, like especially in the last couple of years. And Google has been very aggressive with updates, right? Like target HDKs and versions like that. So
Yeah.
this is a great way to, like, that is how we do it, at least, wherein we run it on the next year's the next October's mandatory version, the same app, and just see what all breaks. So at least we know that, hey, you know what, this next year, this is all the things that we need to do apart from our general work as well.
Yeah, cool. That's a good way to do it as well. You just reminded me of one of the key milestones we hit the other day. So we got our app to target Android 10. So
Then,
yeah, that was it was an interesting journey to get over that hurdle, especially with all the permission restrictions and all that stuff. It was brutal, but we were able to get it done before the deadline, which was good. So yeah, I totally agree. Just running the app on the next year's version, see what breaks, and then try to fix for that. That's sort of the approach we also use. Yeah.
right. And
Yeah.
one thing which you mentioned before this, right, about tests and how they take time as well, right? I think I
Yeah.
recently read last week itself, with the latest Gradle version, they now allow you to disable unit tests when you are running them locally for a particular, at a module level, and not just at,
Yeah.
like today you have that blanket option, right? You either disable all the unit
Right.
tests, you don't run them at all, or you run everything. But now I think the latest version lets you do it at a module level, wherein it only runs the test for the modules you have modified, and it does not rerun the test for the ones which have not been modified.
Exactly, and that's the beauty of it. That's the way now you'd make those build time saving. So instead of running everything across all the modules, if you only worked in a specific module and probably it has a dependency on another one, maybe just those two modules are what should run, and not your entire test suite, right? So I think that's one of the features I particularly love, but we haven't gotten to experience those build savings on our project. As I mentioned, our code is still pretty tightly coupled. So you change something in one module, you find a bunch of the tests run, and you're like, we need to do something about it. Yeah.
Right.
Okay, so there's another question. How to share Gradle files between multiple modules? Not sure.
Hmm.
Do you want to do that?
How to
How to share?
Why do you want to do that?
Yeah,
Hmm.
that part I'm not sure.
how to save
How to share?
multiple
How to
files?
share Gradle files between multiple modules?
Sorry, I didn't get that. Is it save or
Share,
sell?
share.
Huh. Actually, I don't know why would someone want to do that.
Right, because every module should have its own Gradle file, right? Like, why would you share a Gradle file between two different modules?
Maybe he's thinking of some common configurations.
Right, and I see where that could be coming from. That, hey, you know what? For all my modules, apply this like a basic configuration, and then I'll provide more changes on each build.gradle. Interesting.
Oh,
I don't
he
think.
said, like I create versions.gradle, now every module can have that files.
Yeah.
So you can put it under your root directory, right?
Yeah. Then I think he's answered his question, because you'd
Right.
create a separate file and then just apply it into the different builds, the Gradle files that you'd need it in. Yeah, that would be the approach.
Right. But then I'm wondering if that would work, right? Let's say I have a common build.gradle file which does some sort of a configuration. And if I apply it to a bunch of modules, and those modules, can they provide a override the basic configuration setup in those, is what I'm thinking. Like the versions and these things work because you're not overriding them, right? In your independent modules. But what if you, like, let's say you have a rule which says if this module append the name of the module to the build and things like that, and if you have it at a package level as well, then yeah, I'm not sure if the overwriting works.
Yeah, I'm not too sure about that one as well. I think I'd need to try that, because you'd need to have something in that file that would override whatever is in a different file, right?
Right.
I'm trying to think of a task that would do that. I'm not too sure. I don't have anything off the top of my head.
There are multiple.
But yeah,
there are multiple use cases. For example, right now I am working on a code base which almost have more than 150 modules. So
Wow.
we use local AR for build, but before that I didn't even know that local AR exists. Right. So when you come to the situation there, then only you know that, oh, this is also a use case.
right.
Okay. Oh, there's something you've mentioned, Vedanta. You said that you're working on a project that has 150 modules. Is it Gradle based or Maven?
It's Gradle based.
Whoa. Is that Android?
Yeah, it's Android. So we have a dedicated DevX team, and they have done a tremendous job on optimizing the build time. You don't have to build every module. You just load the module you work on, and yeah, that's. So someone recently came up with an idea. It's a script, I think. Yeah, it's a script. So basically, what it does is it creates a separate Android Studio project altogether with the module you work on.
So you run a script and then it generates a separate project only with the modules that you need, right? Yes. Okay, that's pretty smart, actually. Yeah.
I'm not. I'm not a part of that team, but yeah, that team did a great job.
Right.
Yeah.
Vedant, stop justifying your company being a super app by such hacks. Who has 150 modules? Why would you do that ever? Like,
no, when you have 180 engineers, you need to, I mean, modularize your project, right? You cannot work on a single module.
or don't try to build a huge super app so big. Make multiple apps out of them.
Yeah, again, so that also have their own. We can share things, yeah.
Yeah, but if what you mentioned earlier is anything to go by, so that the project with the 150 modules is what you would use to generate the smaller projects for apps, right? Cool. All right. That's an interesting approach, but whoa, 150 modules, that's a lot.
But build time is, again, it's when you
What?
Yeah, you because you never I mean build 150 modules all
Right.
Yeah.
like 2 or 3 modules.
Okay, makes sense.
What does your production release APK build time look like, Vedant? It has to build the 150,
on
right?
CI, yeah.
Yeah, that would be the only blocker in my opinion. But yeah,
Again,
still
it builds
great
on
work.
CI, so
Right.
Cool.
okay. Adnan, do you have any other questions?
Not really. I think this was all I had. Anything else you have?
Cool. I think I can just make a shameless plug.
Yeah, sure.
So so I'm currently working on developer productivity engineering series on my YouTube channel. So just everything from what I shared today, just setting up build cache and build scans, to some of the more advanced stuff like using Gradle Enterprise, showing build scan comparisons, fixing flaky tests and cache misses, and everything in between. And I just tell guys to just tune in. I'm just working on it gradually. I'll also get to feature guys like Nate, who've helped me work on this as well, and maybe some of the Gradle engineers who've also helped us along the way. So I just like to plug that in there. And if you're interested in this space, you can just check it out.
Yeah, it would be great if you can share the URL channel, so we can put it on the description and our Discord. We have a Discord server, so.
Oh, cool. I should actually join that. I didn't know you guys had a Discord server, so I'll join that as well, and I'll share the links to that as well. Yeah.
So, viewers, if you have any question, you can ask on the server too. Roger will be on that server.
Yeah. Cool.
Okay, I think that's it for today. Thanks a lot for joining in, folks. Thanks, Roger, for joining the stream.
Cool. Glad to be here. This was fun. Yeah.
Adnan, say bye.
Hey, bye everybody.
All right, bye Adnan.